really what is anti-Semitism, which is just another word for Jew hatred. That's where it came from, actually. And so for me, it's a very personal issue, and that's where I'm going to begin, because both my parents were Holocaust survivors. And my dad lost his first wife and his 5 children at Auschwitz. He lost his parents and his grandparents. My mom lost her parents and her grandparents and her brother at Auschwitz. And so it's very personal. When they came to the United States after the war, they thought they were coming to a time when anti-Semitism was over. But of course, now we see the resurgence. Never again has become ever again. So after moving from the very personal feelings I have from it, I'll be speaking about what's really going on, the explosion, the profusion of anti-Semitic actions right across the United States in particular. Not just what's happened in Israel, not Europe, but right here in the United States of America, in my very neighborhood. A Jewish man going to synagogue was shot in the back just 2 weeks ago, only because he's Jewish. A place where I walk with my dogs. And so I'm going to talk about not just my family's experience, but the reality of what's happening now. And then we're going to look at the scriptures. And I really think it's crucial that we look at what Psalm 83 has to say. Psalm 83 says that those who hate the God of Israel express that hatred against the people of Israel, the Jewish people, not the political entity, but the Jewish people at large. They want to put them to death as an expression of their hatred against God, but God says no to that, and that's what we really need to see. But so often I think we think, oh, what did people do to make them hate them so? People say things like that to me all the time. Well, what did the Jewish people do? It's not that. It's hatred of the God of Israel and resentment towards his choice of the Jewish people. And that's where anti-Semitism comes from. And that's what we need to understand. First of all, because Christians need to be involved in opposing anti-Semitism because it's the right thing to do. We have to have God's heart. We see his great compassion for the Jewish people, his brokenheartedness. In Isaiah 63, it says, in all their afflictions, he was afflicted. And so when we see this, it's imperative for Christians to take a stand because it's the only right thing to do. We should always stand up for those who are persecuted or oppressed. But there's another factor. I think there should be some self-motivation, self-interest involved, because the Jewish people are the canary in the mine shaft. You know that old illustration about the canary. When the gas would come, the canary that was brought to the mine shaft would die, and then the miners would know to get out of town, get out of the mine. In the same way, when people go after the Jewish people, if they succeed, their next step is to go after followers of Jesus. And so we need to be concerned, and Christians need to be concerned in opposing anti-Semitism, because if it succeeds, then Christians will be next. And so they need to take their stand. My burden for the Jewish people is I was raised in an observant Jewish home in New York City. My parents were both survivors. My heart breaks for the suffering of the Jewish people. Some people just learn the history of the Jewish people and the many kinds of suffering that we've endured. But I was raised with it. It was in the air I breathed. It's something I always knew. It was discussed in my home. And when I came to faith in Jesus, my heart was broken for 2 reasons. One, all the suffering that Jewish people have experienced have caused them to be closed to the message that will give them hope and peace and forgiveness. And so that breaks my heart. And also it breaks my heart that Jewish people are still the objects of hatred when they should be objects of love and compassion. So that's what I was raised with, and I came to know Jesus, and now, because I know the Jewish Messiah, Jesus, I want to communicate that love that he has for them to my Jewish family, my Jewish friends, my Jewish neighbors. In Psalm 83, after it describes the hatred of the God of Israel being the source of the hatred of the people of Israel, it's expressed that way because people hate God, they hate his people. But then the second half of the psalm is a prayer. Just as in the past you delivered your people, so now, God, make them like tumbleweed. make this anti-Semitism go away. I think one of the things that we need to do is be praying for the safety and protection of the Jewish people by God. I think it's something that we ought to be praying for on a daily basis. And also, we need to be not just praying, but beyond the psalm, we need to be proclaiming. We need to be communicating with our neighbors, with everyone around us. Whenever we see anti-Semitism, we need to stand against it. And also, when something happens, too often our political leaders are quiet. And so it seems to me that one of the things that we can do if we're praying, we should also be calling our congressmen, our senators, our mayor, whatever office we can reach, and say, we need to do something, we need to take a stand. Use our privilege that we have as citizens to stand with the Jewish people. I was asked why we should be opposed to anti-Semitism, and I talked about that it's the right thing to do, to oppose it. Also, that it's self-interest, Jewish people being the canary in the mine shaft. But I think the most important reason is it breaks God's heart. God is opposed to anti-Semitism. If we love the Messiah Jesus, we have to identify with what he believes, and he is deeply opposed to anti-Semitism, and we want to identify with him, and that's why we should.